Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Dottie Kuntz. I'm in Vancouver, Washington, and I'm the leader of the Vancouver, Washington IONS Community Group. We serve the members and friends of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, a nonprofit organization dedicated to research and education on consciousness, human potential, and personal and social transformation. Our group is wholly independent of the Institute. So our speaker tonight, we're very excited to have Father Nathan Castle. Father Nathan Castle is from Groves, Texas. He received an MA and an MDiv degree, Master's in Divinity degree from the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. He served in campus ministries at the University of California, Riverside, Arizona State University, and Stanford, and is currently in residence at the University of Arizona. Father Nathan has chaired the executive board of the Catholic Campus Ministry Association. He's also the author of 4 books. The first is Toto 2, The Wizard of Oz as a Spiritual Adventure, and 2 Afterlife Interrupted books, Helping Stuck Souls Crossover, and his latest book, Afterlife Interrupted, Book 3. So, Father Nathan, we're very happy to have you. And if you would, I would invite you to start it out by sharing your personal story. How did you come to this work? How did you even know it was a thing? And how did you come to this work?
Well, I'd answer that in 2 parts. I grew up in Southeast Texas in a practicing Catholic home with my not where I learned spiritual practice, not just rules and regulations and doctrine and dogma. My parents, my mom was a particularly good teacher of the faith. So were my dad's 2 sisters, both of whom were Dominican nuns and first grade teachers. So when I was a little child, I had lots of people around that knew how to talk to a child about why we're here and our relationship with all that is. So one of the things that I learned early on was that I could pray for people that had died and help them in their ongoing life. And when I was little, it seemed like I was told that when we die, we go to one of 3 places, heaven, hell, or purgatory. And it sounded like Canada, the US, or Mexico. Uh, you went to these sort of afterlife nation states, and but it seemed to me that not very many people were perfect and not very many people were horrible, that most people were probably somewhere in the middle, and so that purgatory must be fairly populous. And I learned too that one of my aunts told me that she whispered to me, she said, I need you to listen very carefully. God loves everyone and hears the prayers of everyone, but the prayers of children go straight to God's heart. You won't be a child very long, so don't waste your short childhood. While you're a child, pray for everything and everyone you can think of. She also told me that that the souls in purgatory advance, they move along, they progress toward heaven when we pray for them. And that if yours was the prayer that sprung someone from purgatory into heaven, you'd have a friend for all eternity. So as a child, I imagined that purgatory must be orderly, because on the first page of God's book, God's bringing order out of chaos. So I didn't think there would be some mob clamoring at heaven's gates in a disorganized way. I thought it must be orderly. So I figured maybe it's like at the bank where they make you wait in those zigzaggedy lines. And if you're patient enough, you get to the front. But I was taught that I had a superpower to intercede, to pray for souls in purgatory. So I would pray, first of all, for whoever needed only one child's prayer to spring them, because that was the low-hanging fruit. And then I'd pray for whoever just got there and might be discouraged at how long the line is. I'd pray for that one. And then I would pray wildcard prayers that God could put on toward anybody that he wanted. But I imagine myself as giving purgatory prompt customer service as a little kid. And I knew that the way I was raised anyway, that Catholics were the only Christians that thought there was a purgatory, and the Baptists and other people didn't pray for their souls because they didn't know to. So when I learned about obituaries in the newspaper in the morning and evening, I would look for anybody that wasn't Catholic, and I would talk to their picture and tell them, I'm going to pray for you. And I would fall asleep doing that at night. So that's part of the way that all began. And then this particular part that I write about in the books manifested in, I'm now 68 years old, and it started when I was in my early 40s on a retreat where someone came in the night. I was used to having to take a turn at having the hospital pager on my nightstand. As a priest in a region, there's usually some way in which we get together and decide who's going to take which night. And if there's an emergency in the night and they want a priest, you're it if you have the pager that night. So I was used to being wakened from sleep because of some trauma emergency that required me to rally and get information down and get to work, get to the hospital. So the way this began, I was on a retreat in northern Arizona near Prescott, and during the night, I was contacted by someone who showed me a dream that was not my own material. I was receiving someone else's material in my consciousness, in my dreaming consciousness. It was of a man on fire on the radiator of a vehicle. He had not been in a collision, but for whatever reason, his clothing was on fire and he was screaming and dying, sitting on a radiator of an old car from the late 50s, the kind with fins and lots of chrome. So I wrote the information down, and I spoke to him in prayer and said, I'll get with a partner in the morning and we'll figure out how we can help you. So that's how that all got started. You're muted, Dottie.
So can you describe the process then? What you do? How do you get people out of purgatory?
Well,
Souls out
I
of
only
purgatory?
really use the word purgatory when I'm with a Catholic crowd because it doesn't come up very much. It's not a word, it's not a vocabulary word that gets used outside the Catholic Church, really. But in short, I get a dream of this kind. I have to make a distinction between having a dream, which I do almost every night about my own psychobabble, or receiving a dream, which is someone else's content moving into my consciousness. That happens about once a week. And I keep the journal on the nightstand so that I don't have to get up in the night and rummage around for something to write on and write with. So I write it down. I say a prayer quickly. I go back to sleep, and then I have regular standing appointments with prayer partners whom I meet with on Zoom. And in fact, the last 2 days, yesterday and today, we did 2 sessions yesterday and two today. So we have 4 fresh stories of people that we've just helped move along. So receiving the dream, writing it down, getting with a prayer partner. Once I'm with the prayer partner, that can be either in person or on Zoom, but the pandemic drove a lot of it to Zoom when we couldn't easily be together. We pray what I call protective prayer. I say that I don't pick up hitchhikers here or on any other plane. I believe everyone is well made in the image of God, but not everyone is well behaved and has your best interest at heart. So we begin a session by calling on St. Michael the Archangel, who's the patron of police and a very loving, powerful protector. I always involve Mary, the mother of Jesus. I've known her all my life. St. Dominic, the patron of the order that I belong to, and St. Francis, we're kind of cousins. Our 2 orders were founded at about the same time. And a lot of other saints, St. Mary Magdalene and St. Rose. And today Maximilian Kolbe, who died in World War II, Pope John Paul. I have lots of them. And I always ask for the members of the prayer partners in my family lines, our parents, ancestors, anybody who might be in the light who we're related to. Anyway, I think of it as being in sort of encased in a circle of grace or a bubble of protection and light, so that we're not distracted or messed with. Then I read the story to my prayer partners as I had written it down when I first received it. I get still and simply ask for, normally I ask for the guardian of the person who will be helping that day to speak through me to my partners to give us some clarity about anything that is vague. One of the things about the nature of dreams is that sometimes they have symbology that might escape you if you don't know how to read it correctly. Or someone might, for example, show me that they were the driver of a car that left the road and they died, but they didn't tell me whether they were male or female. Well, I'd like to know that. Or there can just be things like that, that a little bit of detail can be helpful. And I've had what I call a gift of prophecy, the ability to allow God or one of the holy ones to speak through borrowing my voice. So when I do that, I'm co-conscious, I'm alert, I'm not entranced, I'm in no way overtaken. The people who borrow my voice and my consciousness have to use English because it's the only language that I have available. They don't have to speak English speakers, though. They can simply talk and form their thoughts as they always did, and it will come out of me in English. Sometimes they marvel at that. And then my prayer partners are usually just trying to help someone. The people who come to us have all been vetted. They're not random. They went through a violent death, but they've been in kind of a healthcare continuum in the afterlife, healing in whatever way they needed to, and to regain agency after having been through a shocking, violent death. And the thing they do with us is celebrated as a kind of a passage. They the way that during the pandemic, we often saw images of someone who nearly died and was in the hospital for a long time, but who was now running a gauntlet of nurses and other medical workers on their way out the hospital with balloons and a celebration. The work that we do has something of that to it. The people that are moving out of this place are grateful for the help they got there, but they don't need it any longer because they're ready for better things. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
When you say vetted, how do you vet them?
I don't. Their guardian angel and their afterlife care team has decided that, Dottie, you're ready. You don't need to stay with us any longer. You don't need. You might not be a picture of health, but you don't need the hospital any longer.
Create besides these guests, right?
Oh dear, let's put her on. Can you put yourself on mute, please?
Becomes creation, and then graciously allowing it to unfold.
Just a minute. Oh, I don't want to mute you. Okay. Father Nathan, so can you speak again?
He's muted,
you're
Dottie.
I'm sorry, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself, Father Nathan? So I did that accidentally, trying to unmute.
All right.
Person that came on, sorry. So could you tell us just a few stories, and then I'm going to open up so that people can ask questions to you directly.
Sure. Well, each of the books has 13 stories in it. I was going for a dozen, and when I was writing the first of the books, I had a bunch of stories to pick from, and I was just trying to think of which ones might be the most helpful to the readership. And one guy just kept coming up after I thought I had closed the canon, after I had chosen the 12 that I was going to use. This one fellow, Hal, kept coming up again and again. I don't speak of Hal very often, but I thought his story was relatively similar to so many others. There are a lot of car crashes, but for whatever reason, it felt like, I don't know if any of you have a sense of whatever you call Holy Spirit or higher power or whatnot, sometimes being very persistent and trying to knock and get your attention or shake you or something. Well, that's what it felt like. And so I think I'll tell you a little bit about how. He's in chapter 15 of the first book. He he was, do you remember when cars first began to have seat belts that buzzed? Do you remember those public service announcements about buckle up for safety, trying to get us all in the habit of always buckling a seatbelt when we got into the car? Um, uh, he was what he called a weekend dad. He had been divorced. His wife had primary custody of their kids. He saw them, I think, every other weekend or something. He was on a stretch of a divided highway that had been improved and widened, but they hadn't done that with a bridge. So this road it narrowed right as it came onto a bridge. It was raining, and he said, I was in the flow of the traffic. I was going the same speed as everybody else, but we were all going above the speed limit. And it was misty and twilight. And he got near this bridge, and he knew he needed to get closer to the other car next to him, but his bumper clipped a bridge abutment and sent him spinning and tumbling down an embankment. So the last thing he remembered was feeling like he was inside the drum of a dryer. He said, I was bouncing off of the ceiling of the car, both of the walls and everything. He came to rest at the bottom, and he said he had a little bit of recollection of somebody shouting, like somebody, ambulance workers or something, but he passed. And he, in his, I think he woke in a place. Sometimes people stay conscious all the way through a trauma. Other times they go unconscious at the beginning of it and awaken in a place they've been taken. I think, if I recall him correctly, he landed in a place, and then he was in a trauma loop. He kept remembering the last moments of his accident and his death. And in addition to the stimuli of remembering it, he also kept kind of kicking himself that had he buckled his seatbelt, he might not have died. So on the one hand, it was stimuli. On the other one, it was an idea in his head that accused him that he just kept at. So he had both of those things going on. But when he got with us, we just reasoned with him and said, well, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And he had a kind of a funny sense of humor. That doesn't go away but just because you have a trauma or you die. I've met lots of people who talk about their traumatic death with some sense of irony or sense of the ridiculous about what happened to them. And he had a little bit of that. But we told him, well, you wouldn't be in our line if you weren't ready to make this passage. You think that you're so stuck in this looping ideation, and you think that you're so stuck in this self-accusation, but I don't think so. The people that know you better than I do trusted that it's time for you to be in this line. Maybe you're closer to getting over this stuff than you thought you were. We kind of challenged him. As a priest, I'm also a confessor. People come to confession, and I've been trained in how to do that well. And one of the things that people sometimes do in that sacrament is confess some wrongdoing in a way that suggests they don't really want to let it go. They've somehow they want to cling to this idea that I'm responsible for something, or that I did this awful thing and I need to keep myself on the hook for it. Some people that I've dealt with who have died suddenly and traumatically will it could happen to any of us behind the wheel that we make a driving error that caused our death and the death of other people. Then what do you do? Do you spend all eternity grieving over that or kicking yourself? I think he said his guardian finally asked him this question. His guardian said, "How would you like to be eternally unhappy?" May I see a show of hands? How many would like to be eternally unhappy? He said, "Well, nobody quite ever asked me that." And the guardian said, "Well, you keep returning to these same thoughts in these same images, and it never changes. You always emerge unhappy from it. And you'll continue to as long as you continue to think that way and to allow these thoughts to dominate. You can change when you're ready to, but you won't. So far, you haven't. So that's my question to you, buddy. Would you like to be eternally unhappy because you're beginning to groove a pattern?" And he said, "Well, put it to me that way. No, I would not like to be eternally unhappy. In fact, until the day I died, I was a pretty happy guy." And his guardian said, "That's exactly why I'm approaching you this way, because I was with you through your whole life. And until the end, you were a happy guy, and you still are. You just have to get over what happened to you and how you're thinking about it." So I don't know that he did that in one act of the will, but he did it. And he said, "I could see where he was leading me." And I recently there's a story in my third book, a woman named Sylvia, whose husband and 2-year-old were killed in a traffic accident, leaving her widowed and childless. And she was just bereft. She ended up getting a diagnosis of, I think it was uterine cancer that was advanced when she learned of it. And she said, "I didn't run out of the doctor's office celebrating that I had a terminal cancer diagnosis, but I thought it could be my golden ticket. Maybe I wouldn't have a really long life of suffering and grieving my family." But in the end, one of the things she said to us was, we never use their story without first going back and asking if we may have their permission to tell it in a book or on a podcast or in a meeting like this one. They're their stories, and it just seems polite to ask, "May we speak of this?" And when we're in the midst of helping them cross, it just seems rude to say, "Oh, Dottie, don't leave yet. We might want to write a book about you. You've got your own thing to do, and it's not our business to stop in the middle of that." But later we'll come back, and when we did that with Sylvia, we said, "Well, Sylvia, do you have anything, now that your story is going to be in a book, is there anything that you'd like to say to people who read your story?" And she said, "Don't let yourself be defined by the worst thing that happened." She felt like after the death of her husband and her child, she never invited anyone into her home because she said, "Who would want to come to the home of somebody like me?" Well, she decided for everybody in her life that they wouldn't want to come to dinner at her house because she was a reminder to them of tragic sadness. Well, she had to snap out of it eventually and say, "Hey, don't do what I did." Don't let yourself be defined by the worst thing that ever happened. There's more to you than whatever that is. Let me stop and take a break, Dottie, and see if you have a question or if anybody else does, or would you like me to tell more stories?
Well, I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to ask them later. I'm going to open it up to anyone else who have a question at this point. Yes. Judy. You'll need to unmute. Oh, maybe I can unmute you. Let's see. Can you unmute, Judy?
Yes, I just got the message to do that.
Okay.
My question to Father Nathan, since this is the third book that I've read, and you open yourself to the voice of the communicators, Does your voice change in tone or sound at all when they speak through you?
Not very much. There can sometimes be a bit of an accent. People that are from not from this country might use the voice and have some hint of an accent. You know how New Yorkers might talk faster than Westerners do, or Southerners might have a slower paced drawl. There can be subtle differences, but largely the physics of vocal cords are fixed. Whoever's speaking through them, it's still going to sound mostly like me. I try to identify to my prayer partners who's using the voice, and I ask them to do the same, because when I get the transcripts back, the transcript says speaker one, speaker two, speaker three, and I can usually I have more than one prayer partner on a call, so I ask them to identify themselves too when they speak.
And I finished the passage where Mary comes through to you. She's very, very special to me. And I found that part extremely fascinating, that she stepped forward to
Which
assist.
story are you talking about? The Rwandan genocide story?
No, it's in book 3, the one I just I'm currently reading. And I finished this story about Sylvia, the one about the baseball player,
Yeah.
uh Dr. Lawrence. I've read those. I can't remember exactly. I think it might have been Dr. Lawrence where
No, it
Mary.
was, I think you're probably thinking of Estella, the professor from South America who died by fighting over a parking space.
Yeah, that was so tragic.
Yes, and Mother Mary showed up for her as a professor, but didn't identify who she was.
Mhm.
Is that the one you mean?
Yes, I found that extremely fascinating.
Yeah. Um, I'm Christian, and I've known Mary as my spiritual mother my whole life. So she shows up in different ways to different people, and it's not always depicted and with angels and uh, crowns and gowns and so on. She can come any way she pleases. And Estella was a professor, and she had a kind of her life story was that she had felt held down because she was female, that her brothers got more freedoms, and her academic life was harder than it was for a man. And even she 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 resented the fact that she had to get up early and find a parking space at the university because people who outranked her had their own parking spaces. She died fighting over a parking space on the edge of a cliff. um, but then Mary showed up as a professor, a visiting professor, in uh, she she said, I was very assertive. You might think I would be the kind of person that would rush the stage and try to dominate the conversation of the keynote speaker after the talk. But she said, I really didn't like to force myself on a speaker that way. And someone said, well, she does office hours. All you have to do is sign up and she'd be happy to talk with you. So she did that and found out that this woman that she was admiring was in fact Mary, the Mother of God.
Mhm.
she,
That is
I,
amazing.
yeah.
You might just mention that some of the helpers that come through are unexpected, like Dwight Eisenhower. I was astounded when
Oh
he
yeah.
came.
There's somebody in the Darlene asked in the chat. I'm assuming that all of these examples are not Catholic. Yes, no, they're mixed. That some are Catholic, some are Muslim, some have no interest in religion whatsoever. Death is very I don't know, uh, ecumenical. Uh, all kinds of people die, and all kinds of people could need a little help in the afterlife.
So Scott has a question.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So, Father, when you invite protection from so many souls, do you rely on faith that they've shown up, or do you have other assurance they've come to you?
It's what I was taught is the certitude of faith. Um, it's not wishful thinking. It's simply knowing that people are to be trusted. Um, for me, the word believe is related to the word beloved. Is there anyone whose word you take as ironclad truth because they've proven to you that they're truthful? I'm asking you, Scott.
Yes, yes.
Me too. And, and I don't need to belabor it. I know that if I ask for and I'm not asking into the stratosphere. I believe that God is everywhere, including inside me. I don't need to project myself out. All I need to do is uh, ask in my own heart or ask aloud, Mary, would you please be here with me? And that's all it takes. Or all the rest of them. And then off we go. It makes it so much easier. You know, if you don't make everybody prove it all the time that I really do love and care for you and I'm here for you and so on. It's just not that difficult.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Scott. Sister Rosemarie, you have a question?
Yes, please. Father, your work seems to be mainly in the dream time, and mine has come to be as a medium. Actually, Father Bruno was the one that brought me into mediumship. I don't know if you knew him at the Hermitage in Big Sur. He passed in 2015. But my twin, who was a paramedic, passed in 2013. And he came to me in the dream time and took me with him into heaven. It was a sudden passing, a heart attack. And then after that, he began to come in, as Father Bruno does, in order to help the world. So the first occasion, very strongly with my twin was, he rushed into a mediumship circle that I was with, and actually the person said, "You'll have to wait." Well, afterwards, it turned out that he was rushing in because he was trying to warn us when the Los Padres forest was burned down by an arsonist. And he had called me there in the forest because I've been there for 25 years. So I missed that. He came a second time with the fires in Texas recently. And again, I'm not getting them clear enough to be able to act on them. And Father Bruno wants to help the world with asteroids. So, do you have any advice how I could become more clear on getting the messages?
My first answer is no, but that's not very satisfying, is it? Let me see if I can. Uh, I would I would recommend that you go into meditation. Do you have any one aspect of God or a saint or someone like with whom do you have the best clear relationship in prayer?
Um, Jesus or Mother Mary, the Almighty, the
I often
it's
recommend to people that they go into prayer and they ask to be shown the golden age of prayer. When did you have the best clarity, the best sense of connection, and see if there's something that is already sort of in your repertoire that you might have just set aside and forgot about, went on to other things.
Oh no, I have a specific time and I call it the beautiful light. So when I pray, it's specifically to the beautiful light.
Well, that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is
Oh,
um, you're asking for advice about how do I improve, aren't you?
mhm. Yes.
And what I would say is the answer might be within you already. The way to improve might be back to the future. There might be something that you already have experience of that you once did that you might pick up and amplify or build upon.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, couldn't hurt. You also have a community of people here who might be willing to pray for you in whatever way they do that. I end up having people from all over the world to different cosmologies and spiritual traditions, or none of the above, who end up offering to do what they don't always use the word prayer, but I'll say, I'll do the thing that I do for you.
Oh, nice. Well, I'll take all the prayers I can get.
Well, you're not asking for yourself, you're asking just to be a better vessel. So
Right.
why wouldn't God want to answer that prayer?
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Sure.
Mary Zimmerman has a question.
Yes. So Father Nathan, are you familiar with the book, The Journey of Souls or Destiny of Souls by Michael Newton?
No, I'm not. Tell me about that.
Oh, okay. Well, it was along the lines of many masters, many lives. It was a psychologist that was past life psychologist who started recognizing past lives in people. But Michael Newton's work was expanded because he didn't believe that it could happen. But when past lives began showing up, he became curious about what happened in between the lives and asking those questions of his patients. So it was very interesting. It was interesting, and I just wondered if you'd ever found him within some of your meetings.
No, but I'm around so many people, but by being in, with groups like yours, and then the International Association for Near-Death Studies, I'm quite active with them, and I recently had to say to a man, I can't keep up with all the recommendations that you're giving me for all the videos I should look at and all the books I should read. I end up with stacks of things, and then it's just completely random, Mary, about what I end up reading. It seems to me, I think, oh, that book's been sitting there a while. I think I'll pick that one up. See what this person has to say.
Thank you.
Sure.
Janine has a question.
Yeah. Father, I had a friend ask me to check in on her grandson who had died of leukemia after just like he was just barely a year old. And he looked so self-satisfied. His whole life he had had cancer, or pretty close. And he looked like he had just made this wonderful meal and sat down to eat it and pushed away from the table and like, oh, I did a good job. And it was, surprising and beautiful. And he also asked to tell his mom that he loves her. I'm just wondering if you ever, maybe they don't need help, but if you ever run into that kind of thing.
How old was the child at the time of his death?
Just a little over a year old.
And how old did he appear to be in the scene that you just described?
Maybe a year or a little more than a year.
All right. Well, again, I haven't been given a guided tour. I can just tell you what I've seen in the bits of things that I've been exposed to.
Uh-huh.
One thing I have seen is that when there are little children that die before their parents, there are also parents who die before their children are raised to adulthood, and that sometimes they are paired up because they have sort of a hunger they wish that they were with their parents, or they wish they were with their kids. And sometimes they're just told, you see that child over there? That child would really love a hug. And so I've seen that happen. It's very natural to pair people together. And I remember when I was working at Stanford, the hospital there, the children's hospital at Stanford, had a group of people that did nothing but hold very sick children. Sometimes even terminally ill children. So people had to be through some specific training to be in a heartbreaking scene like that. But all they did was hold a child. And I've seen something like that on the other side, where little ones and then sometimes the same thing with like older children and younger children, where sometimes they'll be put to work caring for one another.
Yeah, it was I think he had died that day. I mean, according to our time.
Oh, uh-huh.
And then he said, well, I'm just gonna lay down and take a nap now.
Oh,
And
right.
bye.
One
Wow.
thing I've seen with regard to childhood is that when trauma enters into people's lives early, especially like sexual abuse in childhood, ever after, sometimes young people will feel like they need to fake being normal. They don't know what it feels like to have had a childhood without being sexually abused, but they're going to try to look like everybody else.
Mm.
So sometimes they have a secret, and they just had to work around it. Then they get into the place of truth, where the place where we end up working, everybody has to tell the truth. They're
Mm.
not forced to, but they won't progress if they want to persist in some sort of falsehood, even if it's telling themselves a story that's not completely true. Um, and what I remember meeting this one woman who said, more than anything, I want to go back and be 4 again. She wanted to know what it would be like to be me without having to drag the
Oh,
memory of sex abuse through life. And so
wow.
she said, well, did you know that that's an option that's open to you? If you'd like to do that, all you have to do is say so and we'll set it up.
Wow.
She decided that that's more than anything else she could think of doing. That's what she wanted to do, to know herself without that story.
Wow.
Yeah, that had never occurred to me.
That is really beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Father.
sure.
And so Paula has a question.
Yes, thank you. Father, I wonder if you can speak to, I'm very interested to know, you say that the people that come to you for help have been vetted by
Yeah.
the angels and the guides.
Hmm.
And you say that some are of Catholic faith, some of other religions, some of no religion.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, for those who are not of the Catholic faith, say Muslim or not Christian or agnostic or atheist, what can you tell me what the experience you have with these people is when you help them to move from where they're stuck? Where do they go after?
I can tell you a story about Nadi, who was an Iraqi businessman and a Muslim. Um, I think he is in book 2. Uh, his mosque had been bombed by what he called the other kind of Muslim. I think he meant Sunni or Shia. And he was in Baghdad, but some of the violence was that kind. His mosque had been bombed. It was no longer suitable for prayer. He said, we no longer had a proper imam because there was so much social destruction that even having a pastor didn't happen. But he said, I was a businessman, and there were several of us who got together and decided, well, we need to at least find a place where we can pray that's safe. So they chose a warehouse that was windowless and that backed onto an alley. But Muslim folk, at least in his experience, don't pray, and the men and women don't pray in the same room. And so they needed another place for the women that was across the alley. The men were at prayer when they heard gunfire, machine gun fire, and they had to decide whether to go and check on their women. In order to do that, they would have to risk their own lives. They would have to open the door. And he decided he couldn't live with himself as someone who might allow his wife and daughters to be killed without trying to help them. So he went out into the street. When he did, he saw blood all over the place, people in pain, and a little girl who was 10 years old with 2 men standing over her with machine guns pointed at her head. And they'd given her a machine gun and said, you kill him or we kill you. And I think they also had her mother and her sisters. And so she fired and killed him. Well, he ended up in my line, and he ended up saying, here I am now with an American, a Christian, and a priest. I can hardly imagine how how this came to be my life. He said, he said, but what they're teaching me is my religion taught me many things that were true, but one thing that it didn't, that it taught me that was not true, was that there were only some good kinds. There were some right kinds of people that were in God's favor and others who were not. And he said, I know now that we all are part of the one God. And he ended up moving on what he called a parade of floats. He said, we live between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and it were it not for those two large rivers, that part of the world wouldn't be habitable. It'd be too dry. But he said, everything that we did that involved celebration involved the rivers somehow. And there were almost always festivals that were on the rivers, many times with decorated floats or boats. And when it came time for him to cross, he said, the water is rising, where he was in a place where other people like him, other people who had been killed in that religious violence. And he said, there are lots of us here that don't feel like we have the energy to move on our own, but there are floats coming for us. And our loved ones are calling out to us that if we want to, all we need to do is extend a hand and they'll pull us aboard.
Mm.
Wow. So he floated off that way. He showed up not very long ago at the beginning of the current book 3. There's a young boy named Omi who is 10 years old. He was living in Iraq. He loved school. And, you know, their school system does the same segregation of gender. So he was in an all-male classroom as a 10-year-old when the classroom was stormed by a militia that forced all the boys to join them and grabbed them and brought them in, you know, just absconded with them. And he never had another free moment. He never saw his family ever again. And they just forced him to learn how to shoot a gun and how to be drafted into their fighting. He he showed me in a dream pointing a gun out a window at a woman and not pulling the trigger. And I woke up. But he was only 10, but he was pointing a gun out the window, and this woman, who he said reminded me of a teacher. She was very authoritative. She was looking down the barrel of a gun, and she looked me in the eye and said, you put that thing down. This is not who you are.
Wow.
And he did it. And then he had hell to pay because the guys that bossed him around, that bullied him, called him a baby and he said, they gave me the worst food and the worst jobs ever after. He said, fortunately for me, I didn't live very much longer because I was among flying bullets all the time. And one of them finally hit me and finished me off. But in his case, when it was time for him to move, the person who came for him was Noddy, the man from the other book, who said, I became a student of your writing after I experienced the goodness of your helping me. And he said, I just said to the ones around me, I want to learn more about that, and I want to learn how I can help. And before long, he was put to work. So I might have gotten lost in my own storytelling, Paula. Did I answer the question that you asked?
That's wonderful. I just appreciate I was right there with you. I just thank you.
As to where they go, it's funny because again, if you follow the analogy of being the discharge staff at a medical center,
Yeah.
you might have an office near the front door. And
Oh.
where do they go? I don't know. I'm really not
Goodbye.
in charge of where they go after they leave the place that I'm at. But then when we do ask their permission to use their stories, we do hear follow-up stories. And
Oh.
a lot of those are delightful. Many of them have to do with education because there's so much to learn. I've been in school since I was in kindergarten. I'm now 68. I'm living on a university campus. I never really left. I love being around learning communities. And what I've seen is the afterlife parts that I've seen are full of learning because it's just so fun and so fascinating. There's so many new things to learn, and you're almost never the only person that wants to know a thing. Other people want to know the same thing you do, and before you know it, you have companions, compadres, to classmates to learn. So I've seen a lot of people who talk about going back to school, or there's some practical things that they want to learn. Often are, how do I stay active in the lives of my loved ones on Earth in ways that are wholesome and appropriate?
That's a really good question. What's the answer?
Well, there's a school for that, and you can be taught how to do it. You have to. One of the things that's very important is the present moment. I would imagine a group like yours, a lot of you are meditators or interested in all kind of spiritual and metaphysical things. You know the importance of the present moment, don't you?
Yes.
If if you spend too much time on the past or the future and leave the present, you do it at your own peril. So some of them have to learn about how to be who they are right now, and what amount of attention is appropriate to spend on trying to reach out to my family on Earth. To not be a ghost, some creepy haunting thing. They can also learn how to be at Thanksgiving dinner under the Christmas tree, or how to how to come close to you if you should call out to them in prayer or something like that. There are ways that can be taught, and people can learn those things. There's another thing too, that there's nothing to limit you to being only in one place at a time after you leave the body. If you want to do more than one thing at a time, you could, but you first have to learn how to allow your consciousness to do two things at once. And apparently that's not automatic, but it gets taught. And it seems like there's a lot of mentoring. As soon as you ask about something that I'd like to know, somebody's there showing you how to do it. In the newest book, there's a story of a man named Rodolfo, who was probably a field worker in California. He was a boss, had authority for some other migrant workers doing field work. And two women had crossed the southern border illegally, and the coyotes that helped them do so felt entitled to some of their wages every day. So kind of turned them, didn't just get them across the border, but then made them kind of indentured servants and bullied them into giving up some of their money at the end of a workday. And they were working alongside others who didn't have to do that. And they complained and said, well, there's these guys that come and take part of our pay every day. And this man named Rodolfo heard that, and he just said, you know what? That's not happening on my watch. And he said, I'll stand up to them. He said, I was perfectly capable of ignoring persons who were suffering. I wasn't always compassionate and always that helpful. But he said, this was happening right in front of me, and I knew their names. And it just felt to me like this was a place I had to make a stand. And he said, I didn't do it because I was religious, although I went to mass. And he knew he was talking through a priest. But he said, I did it because it was right. It just was right that somebody stand between these men and the women they were doing this to. And then in the scene that where I met Rodolfo, we were in the back of a pickup truck, and so people were singing the Spanish version of Happy Birthday. And it was his birthday, and they were celebrating him at the end of the workday because they were going to be taken to different places where they slept, and everybody wasn't going to be in the same spot. So before they parted at the end of the day, the ones who couldn't be at his party were singing him happy birthday when these men shot and killed him.
Wow.
And he said, he asked, do you know about that carnival game Whack-A-Mole? He said, they whacked me and I fell down. But before I could hit the ground, I was already popping back up.
Wow.
And then he said, when he first showed up at the beginning of that session, I said to my prayer partners, I don't know what in the world we're dealing with today, but the energy is extraordinarily high. I'm sure it'll be explained to us, but for some reason, the energy is really, really high. And when it unfolded, he explained to us that from the instant that he was shot, all the cloud of martyrs, I don't know that not just necessarily Christian martyrs, but any who gave their life for another, swooped him up and included him in their number. And he said, I'm sort of like in this, it's like a cloud. And he said, sometimes I'm liquid and sometimes I'm solid and sometimes I'm vapor. He said, I'm learning how to be me now. And he said, the energy that you're feeling isn't just me because I'm some exalted being. It's just I'm in the company of all these people who are very important, or they're very high spirits or something. So when we went back to ask his permission to use his story, I told him in prayer the night before, hey, Rodolfo, we're going to be calling on you in the morning. Would you? I sometimes pray to them without hearing anything back. I just trust that they hear me. I think, Scott, wasn't that your question? I said in prayer, Rodolfo, we're going to be calling on you tomorrow to ask if we can use your story. Just be ready. Well, in the morning when we asked for him, he came through. And he was it wasn't all that energy. And I said, well, Rodolfo, the last time you were here, it was all this stuff. And he said, yes, it was a little like I was the generating station. I would have burned out the toaster. I knew I needed to get my energy down to a smaller amount to be able to talk with you better. So I asked some of the people around me if they could show me how to do that. And they said, oh yeah, it's really easy. Just do it this way. And they showed me how to take my energy and get it to the right size so that I didn't overwhelm you.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Do one more, just since I can, I have to ask you, when you're saying that they're told not to get stuck in the past or the future, but to be in the present, and then but they can be there like under the Christmas tree and so forth. Can they come maybe like as a blue jay, or does it always have to be human?
I'm familiar with the idea of people having a kind of a calling card of like my mom was hummingbirds.
My mom was a blue jay.
Okay. I don't know that it means that they necessarily had to become the hummingbird, but they somehow influenced the hummingbird to buzz in your
Okay.
direction. I don't
Thank
know.
you. Thank you.
In the chat, Darlene says, is there a duration of service, for example, will Nadi return to source at some point in time? Depends on what you think of as source. I think of my creator as being everywhere always and not necessarily in some place that's not here. So would Nadi have to go stop being or doing what he is now in order to return to source? I don't know. So Darlene, do you want to jump in, Darlene?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
So it's not I believe in reincarnation. So that with that said, I believe that the service that he's given is at some point will be finished, and then maybe he would return and come back as another baby and grow and that sort of thing.
One thing that Nadi did tell us is he said that transition that ascent or that graduation that you assisted me with, I've done another one since we were last together. He said he moved from another level to yet another one above that. There's something about levels that keeps happening. But yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if among folk who I'm around that believe in reincarnation, do you believe that everyone reincarnates or ought to, or is that optional?
My personal belief is irrelevant, but if I were to say, I think we all do, and I think we do it many, many, many times, just as an expression of creation for God.
Mm-hmm. One of the ways that as a Catholic, I think of as if the point of reincarnation is spiritual growth and advancement, my tradition teaches that we needn't become incarnate in another life in order to do that, that we can continue to be who we are and advance in ways that might be analogous to what people are doing in a string of reincarnated lives.
Thank you. I didn't mean to take it off on a tangent.
I don't think that's very tangential. A reincarnation comes up all the time. And my background is in sociology, is in social sciences, and I try to go about this work with the methodology of a social scientist, which is to observe behavior and report it. That's why when we're in our sessions, I record with an app on my phone. So we have people in their own words. And then I put them in a book. And in the book, I try to make it clear where I'm editorializing or commenting and where the raw material, the text itself, is there on the same page. And people might draw different conclusions than I did. And sometimes I invite that and say, if you, and a lot of times, I also have a podcast, The Joyful Friar, and we do what we call a trilogy. So I'll tell a story like, I don't know, like Rodolfo I was just talking about. In the first of the episodes in that trilogy, I just give the essence of the story. Here's what I saw. Here's how this person died. The second one is what we call compassionate response. And that is, I'm primarily receive comment from people who have read the story or heard it in an audiobook and then have some response to it. And I try to have a podcast just about response to it. So on all of these things, I'm really just trying to report out what I believe I've seen that might be beneficial for people. And then if I make some comments about it, to try to keep them pretty modest.
I want to thank you for that. I am totally amazed by your dedication to the integrity of what you do.
Well, thanks. I don't know why I wouldn't be. It's sacred work, and it's not just because the people have died. I mean, I've worked among the living for a long time too. I mean, one's living on this plane, and when people open their hearts to you and share their story, it's sacred, and people deserve your best. And whether it's here or hereafter, I try to give my best. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah. So Victoria has a question. Victoria in the cloud.
Yeah, she's still having trouble with that camera.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I have a number of questions. I mean, what would happen if they didn't have you to go to, or what?
Oh my God, they just probably go to hell because the universe revolves around me. No, it's a good question, Victoria. One of the things that I've learned is that the universe always has a multitude of forms. There's always lots and lots of ways that things can play out, and I'm sure we're not a good fit for a lot of folk. But some of the guardians will sometimes say, will tell us how their person came to be on our line. Sometimes the guardian will say to the one that they're caring for, would you please put me in charge of this decision? If you do, I will serve you well. And they were given permission to choose our team. And when that's happened, the guardians say, one of the things that makes you attractive is you're so methodical, that you always do the same thing the same way. Remember, our people have been through trauma. We don't want surprises. we want to trust that the process that we're going to invite them into is consistent with what we've seen you do in the past.
Wow.
There's no
That's
reason
powerful.
to go into novelty when what you're doing works. You know,
Right.
but
So what do you tell people? So it sounds like you, as you said, talk to a lot of living people. And I wonder what's the gist of what you, no, I'm sure it varies, but what do you try to convey to people about death and preparing for it and not being afraid of it and all that stuff?
well, again, I'm a lifelong Catholic Christian, and our most important days are the Triduum from Good Friday to Easter morning. Even the nerve that it takes to call Good Friday good, I've always liked that. That we can look at the most appalling thing that could happen and say, God's doing something good here. Just be patient. Just wait this out. It's going to turn, and it does. I would like for everybody everywhere within the sound of my voice to understand that they are already an eternal being, that many of the people on this call appear to be my age or older. And the older you get, there can be more decrepitude. There can be more conversations about what you used to be and what you used to do. Um, um, I just believe that if people understood that they're going to live in an abundant future after they die, it might help the way that they navigate the time that they've got remaining here. They might be able to live in joyful hope right this minute, or be of greater service to people around them right this minute, rather than being just feeling like they're going to disappear into nothing. I really am. The Christian, the way it gets spoken of in Christian language is that it's called the Easter proclamation. He is risen. You might have seen that on an Easter card, or Jesus is risen from the dead. We're not just happy for him. He's the template. He's showing us what we all truly are, and that we're all part of the divine, and that we really are indomitable. Get over it. Yeah, you're gonna die of something, but death is like being born. It's a moment. In fact, I've heard people talk about it the way that you might at a cocktail party or someplace where you're meeting a lot of people you don't know very well. I've talked to people who committed suicide who said, "I'm so relieved that I don't have to walk around that with that on my name tag. I don't have to go into that every time I meet anybody, because everybody died of something, and it's really not that interesting to talk about after a while." Would you like to see pictures of my grandbaby or my dog? Would you like to see my Facebook post about my breakfast? There's just so many things that we can think are going to be of interest to other people. And what I found in the afterlife is how you died after a while is just not very interesting. It has too much competition. There's too many other things that are way more interesting than that. So if you're saddened or grieving or angry or whatever about the way you died, why don't we work on getting over that, dear? There are enough other better things to think about than that.
Well, that's sort of, I'm sorry, I'm kind of had a lot of questions, but I'll make this the last one. So I was wondering how you keep you don't get brought down by the stories that you hear. And I think you just kind of answered.
It's
that.
similar to, I don't know if any of you are Catholic and have ever been to a Catholic penance service. Parishes often have them in Lent and in Advent before Easter and before Christmas, where they'll gather up maybe half a dozen or more priests from around the region and say, "Come one, come all." Well, you'll have all these choices. You can pick whoever you would like to go to confession to. And we might be there from like 7 until 9. And then at the end of it, you've got a long one and you're wanting to lock the doors and go home. Sometimes people have said to me, Father, that just must be so depressing to a person after person to hear that. And I say, no, not at all. Not if they're telling the truth, not if they're speaking from the heart, because what you're seeing is courage right in front of you. People telling the truth and owning up to parts of themselves that they bring into the light. And I get to watch people. It's not always about sin and grace, but it's about getting over resentment or anger or something. Just people telling the truth to themselves about themselves is inspiring. And seeing people get some of the people that I've dealt with, they were murdered, suicides, fentanyl deaths, addictions, but they're all healing, and that's the inspiring part. Once in a while, I'll get ones that are that make you just want to say that's enough for today. There are two categories of that. I don't even like bringing them up, but I've already opened the topic. Abductees, people who get disappeared and put in someone's basement.
Oh.
Or trafficked, sex trade and that kind of thing. And the other would be the drug cartels. The level of cruelty done for sport. Still, anybody that I deal with, their guardian is with them. And you might ask, what kind of guardian were you if you let me get abducted or, murdered or whatnot? The guardians are kind of like parents in that you can't keep your kid from everything. You can do the best you can to keep them safe and surround them with good, but the guardians will still be on the job even if the death that you came to seems awful. The guardian will stay with you in it. Very often I'll hear the people that went through the windshield of a car, they'll say, yes, it's true, my body went through the windshield, but I was not in it at the time. My guardian got me out of there at the split second right before that. Or one lady died in one of those California wildfires and said, it's true that my body burned, but I wasn't in it. She was so sweet. She was like 83 years old. Lucille, calm under fire, I called her. She woke up in the middle of the night with pretty colors out the window. She said, I've never seen colors like that out my window. It was middle of the night. What are all those colors out there? She looked out the window and thought, oh crap, I'm in a wildfire. The whole neighborhood is on fire. And she sized things up. She said, I'm a widow. I'm 83 years old. I'm in my house coat and slippers. I'm in a wildfire. She said, if I were a younger woman, I might have gotten the car keys and made a run for it, but I didn't like my chances on the driveway. At least I had a roof and walls around me. And I thought, sometimes you see on TV that the tornado hit all the houses except this one, or the fire skipped around and saved that one. She said, I could have run around the house and scared the cats, but instead, she said, I gathered them to myself and I said, let's sit here in my lap and we'll see how this goes.
Amazing.
And then she said, she wondered aloud to me, like I would know the physics of it. She said, can all the oxygen go out of the air before the fire gets there?
Wow, she is really thinking.
Well, she went unconscious and she wondered why she went unconscious. And she wondered, could a wildfire create its own ecosystem, and can the oxygen be depleted before it burns? Because she said, all I did was go unconscious. She said, I never thought dying in a wildfire in my home could be so easy. She's, all I did was fall asleep and I woke up and it was over. And then when we did go back and ask her for her permission to use her story, she was so sweet about it. She said, oh, it wasn't so bad. I was already an old woman. Death would have come for me one way or another. It came this way. And then she said, I felt worse for the people that had younger families. And then she said, I did have pretty things, and it's too bad, because by the time the fire finished off my house, everything was singed. Who would want some singed reminder of their loved one? I wouldn't. So she was thinking about little, I don't know, objects in her house that somebody would have inherited if it hadn't burned down. And she said, "Oh, they're all singed. Who would want that?"
Oh, my
Sweet lady.
goodness.
Yeah, sweet lady named Lucille.
Just one more. So what, do you have any suggestion for us that we could do for people who die? I just found out a friend died this morning and just, yeah.
I believe that it's not a religious idea or practice necessarily, but if you from your do you have a prayer practice or a spiritual practice of some kind, meditation or quietude?
Yeah.
Whatever you
Yeah.
call it, focus. And to
Mhm.
me, that at least involves putting the phone down, turning the TV off, um, maybe being alone in a room can be helpful. Where you do the best you can to get in your heart of hearts and speak from it, and then say hello to your loved one, whoever that was. If you want to borrow my practice, the way Catholics do this, we believe that God has three primary persons: Father, Son, and Spirit. And when we cross ourselves, we touch the forehead, that's the mind, the heart, the pulmonary system, the heart and lungs, and it's the sign of the cross is just pulling ourselves into focus. And then I think of myself as being inside God, because God's everywhere.
Hmm.
God's larger than I am. Think Venn diagrams. If God is the huge Venn diagram and I'm small, I'm inside of God. I sometimes will ask a group, I could ask this group, have any of you here ever lived inside anyone else?
Mother's womb.
All of us did.
Yeah.
We're just doing it again. We're inside the one who's bringing us to life. And so if you start there, then you don't have to send a signal, bounce it off a satellite. If you just start with the idea that I'm inside of God, and so is my loved one, you can think of them as being next to you, and forming that thought can make it be. And they can hear you quite clearly. And then they don't have to be religious people necessarily, nor do you. You just communicate heart to heart, and they'll get the message. One thing that can be helpful is if people, because I'm so used to working with people who died suddenly and traumatically, is that oftentimes they feel that I use the word interrupted in my book titles. They didn't get to say goodbye, or something was unfinished, or sometimes there's some moral quality to it. I never apologized for the way I treated you or whatnot. One thing that you can do is, if you have any reason to believe a person and you are not on good terms, you could say, I wonder if you and I could forgive each other across the board. Could we just could I offer forgiveness to you for anything you ever said, anything you ever did that hit me the wrong way? And would you consider doing that for me?
Wow.
Just to get we have complicated lives. We have lots of relationships. Wouldn't it be good if you and the person that you're talking about were just good with each other? Just, we're cool. Next time you think of me, just smile. We don't have any unfinished business between us, because we don't want that. That's a gift that you can offer a person who's died. And then I learned to do this when I was in college, because my dad would put money in my checking account and never ask what I spent it on. He would just, over the phone, he would say, "Son, do you need anything?" And I'd say, "Well, maybe I do, or maybe I don't, and after he died, that's what I started doing. I would say, "Dad, do you need anything?" And I would send him prayers as though it was money in his checking account. And I would say, "I don't care what you do with it, but here's," and we call money currency, but from current, energy, light, fluid moving in a channel. when I pray for my loved ones, I send them money. I, I just pray that I can give them a resource that that is like a gift card. I don't need to know what you spent it on. I'm sure that you'll find a good use for it. Here's my prayer, and I only want it to give you joy. However you work that out.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so
It's easy to
much.
do, and you can do that. You can do it in your own words, but send your deceased ones a gift card.
Great idea.
Joy. Thank you so much.
Janine, you have another question?
Yeah,
Victoria?
Father, this has been wonderful. Oh my gosh, I am so grateful. And my question is, since you work on the university campus, do you ever share some of this, or is that part of your work to work with the students and share? And how does that go if you do?
Um, I'm in a Catholic setting, and we have a lot of, this is an active Catholic student center. There's probably 100 students in and out of the building any given day.
Mm.
There's a service, a mass every afternoon at 5:15. I say the one on Wednesday, so they hear me preach.
Mhm.
I hang around them a little bit. I used to do that work full time, and
Mhm.
now I'm more the grandfather figure that just hangs around. And uh, but it happens that this coming week, our university has a consciousness studies program, and in tandem, the University of Arizona and the University of Michigan have a 30th anniversary. What do they call that? Chantel, how do you do it? The study of consciousness, TSC, isn't that right?
The science of consciousness conference.
The Science of Consciousness Conference. I really need to put that down before we show up there on Tuesday and I get that wrong.
It's tongue-tying.
But this is going to be, it's one of those conferences that has lots of PhDs making presentations, and their titles have vocabulary words that I don't even know, and I wouldn't want to be in a spelling bee at this thing. But Chantel and I will be there, and we have I think 20 minutes on a panel where I'll at least get to do a little infomercial of what my work is, and it's on a parapsychological panel. So there's a lot of like mediums and different other kinds of after-death communication folk, shared death experience, shared crossing. There's a lot of different things that will at least be in the, I'll be in the mix just this week with
Wow.
that.
Well, really what stands out for me, along with all your stories, is your spirit, your presence, your attitude. What a gift to this world. I really feel that way.
Thank you,
And and this is from somebody who was Catholic. I'm Quaker now. So it's beyond that. And I'm just really grateful for you being sharing.
Thank you. The word Catholic just means universal.
Uh-huh.
And uni means one. I believe in the oneness of the creation that God has made, and kind of like Nadi, the wrong kind of Muslim. You know, that's what he said. He said, I was the wrong kind of Muslim. They thought that my prayers offended God and they should bomb my mosque. He just said, I'm so happy to be in a place where no one's doing that anymore. But he said, my wife and my kids are still here, and I'm conscious that there's still lots of work to be done. But it's all one, and God's loving everybody all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Quaker or Catholic or whatever.
Beautiful. Thank you, Father.
Yeah,
So
the person who has their hand raised has a phone number that ends in 4695.
Does she have her hand up?
Yes, not the little mechanical hand, the real one on the end of her
Oh,
arm.
the real, okay. I can't see yours.
And you have a clock over your head. I want you to unmute and ask your question. 217-620-4695. I'm talking to you, sweetie. But you have to unmute. there's a button. Oh, you're on your phone, aren't you?
Yeah. But you
All
can
right, now
tell
she's
you.
miming something to me. I don't know how to help you, dear.
Dottie, can you
yeah.
do ask to unmute?
Oh, do I have to do that to let her unmute? I didn't think I had to.
Well, since
Thank
she,
I wanted to just pass on one more thing because it's getting late at my end.
Yeah.
And when we're born, we're not alone as we come into the world. We are with our mothers, and we may have somebody assisting at the delivery. But sometimes people are fearful that they will die alone. And I think that reading your books, Father Castle, we have this wonderful message from the guardians that says often, the one that I guarded and loved.
Yeah.
And I just want people, everybody in this circle tonight, to remember that when the time comes for us to pass, and to remember every day, especially when we go to sleep at night, that we have a guardian, that we've not been alone. And when the time comes for us to leave this world, we're going to be guided, led, carried, and loved into the next world.
Amen.
And I think thought, thank you.
And the guardians are not necessarily smarmy, pious harp strummers or something like that. They're as different from one another as human persons are, and they love you, and they're on the job, but at the same time they have other interests, and they can be funny and anyway, they're just like your guardian can be a great friend. I've known my guardian for probably about 30 years now, and he's not all that talkative. Once in a while he has something to say, but I can at least acknowledge his presence and thank him for what he's doing.
So
and they don't have gender, by the way. I'm using the masculine pronouns, but they know that we're used to gendered personhood, and so they'll present themselves as more one than another according to what they think is the better fit.
So Heather has a question. Another question.
Yes.
So perfect timing for you to say that, Father, because I just wanted to share that the maxim that I follow with respect to all of the beloveds, our ancestors who passed over and are on the other side of the veil, all they want us to know is that they love us.
Mhm.
And we are to ask them for help and
Yeah.
support, whatever that is. And they're just waiting for us to implore them for that support and that assistance.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a supremely great book that's relatively new. I won't recommend it to you, Father, just because you have a big pile already, it sounds like.
I can put another one on the pile.
Yeah. I can certainly put in the chat, but it's entitled Take Back the Magic: Conversations with the Unseen World. And this woman, her name, the author is Perdita Finn, and it's absolutely a fabulous book. And she was able to write this book and actually co-wrote it with her dad after he passed over. And through the writing of this book, she was able, and they were able to heal their relationship. It's really beautiful and highly, highly recommend it.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
We had a speaker last year, Ron Papalardo, who is on our YouTube channel, Vancouver Ion's YouTube channel, whose son passed away from suicide, and he was able to converse with his son. So you might be interested in looking at that too, all of you. So I did have a question too, that you said something about a shared crossing. What is that?
That's Chantel, that's William Peters, isn't it? Yeah. William Peters has been developing this for a number of years. The way that, and I might not be getting it right, you could always Google it and, find more precise information on it. But I think what Dr. Peters does is helps people who are accompanying a person that might be in palliative care, someone whose death is approaching, and they teach meditative techniques to calm the mind and to be still and to be with the person, co-conscious with them as they leave the body for a brief time, and to be to see what they see, go where they go, something on the order of a near-death experience. You know how people have had an NDE usually have some sort of a travelogue to tell about, well, I went through this tunnel, or I came to this place and I talked to this person. Whatever those next events are as a person's leaving the body, the Shared Crossing Project helps people attune themselves to the mind of the person that's leaving in a way that helps them share in the experience for a short time.
So they're kind of an escort, like
Or at least a traveling companion.
traveling companion.
I don't know that it involves escorting as much as it does just well, they use the word shared, being with,
Interesting.
rather than just watching and take their last breath and then be, in the presence of a dead body. The experience of the person in the room is that they got to go with their loved one for a short time as they left the body.
Wow. Cool.
It seems to me that particular thing has gotten a lot of momentum lately. You know how that happens, where something that's been around for a while suddenly catches on. It seems in IONS that shared crossing events keep popping up more often. I'm saying IONS, your organization is IONS.
Right.
IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies, is where I'm a member. And I think they're having a seminar on that this week, aren't they, Chantel? Do you know about that?
Yeah, I think it's today.
Is today? Yeah. All right. Too bad.
And so I did have another question about perpetrators. You've talked about people in car accidents, or what happens when people have been a perpetrator, like, and then they're shot by the police or whatever. Have you had any people like that? I was just
A little.
what happens to them.
Remember, I only get vetted ones. I get people who have worked on their story and their truth and are ready to move to a next level. So whatever they perpetrated, they would have needed to own up to the truth of it, done what they could to do some sort of making of amends. I remember once being with a man who killed his girlfriend's child. But he said it was completely impulsive. He said it was stupid. And I couldn't even believe I did it. And now I killed him. I broke the heart of his mother. I ruined my life all in one moment. And he was remorseful. And he said after he did it, he made sure that he didn't go to the police and turn himself in, but he said, I made myself so easy to catch that I kind of, and then he said, he talked about being in prison and things that happened in prison, and then what happened afterwards. That one thing that sometimes comes up is people want to make amends that are not yet appropriate. If you're familiar with the 12 steps of AA, I think it's around step 5 where people begin to move into making amends, but they're supposed to do that with the help of a sponsor. And you have no business making amends with somebody that's got a restraining order against you because you want to make amends. So I've seen plenty of people who wish they could apologize to the other people in the car accident that they caused. And they're frequently told, that's a noble thought, hold on to it, and we'll let you know when it's timely. But for now, don't worry yourself about that. There'll be a moment when that's timely and you've proven that you'll be ready.
Interesting. So Heather, you still have your hand up. Did you have another question? Oh, okay.
No, I just thought, I didn't know I had to take my
That's
hand.
okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I did have one other question. We were talking about the guardians and how, so the guardians are people on the other side, are souls on the other side. Are they ancestors or are they a special class of souls or who are the guardians?
Well, in a group like this, you'd probably have a number of different ways of answering that, but the Catholic priest here, I would answer it from the way that I was taught in the cosmology that belongs to our faith. The guardians belong to the angelic order.
Mhm.
I was taught that there are at least three kinds of persons: divine persons, Father, Son, and Spirit; angelic persons, including the guardians; and human persons.
Mhm.
Those are the classic ones. In my lifetime, there's been more of an opening of a category of animal personhood. And Pope Francis has sort of encouraged that to some extent. But the angels are persons with whom we share personhood, but not matter. And my guardian is an angel and not I might have people like my dad, who died in 1997, who choose to hang around me, but that doesn't make him my angel. He's just
Okay.
my dad.
Yeah, okay. So I have a question about that because I had an experience. So do they show up in physical body, sometimes physical form, or
They
do
can.
they co-opt somebody and have them do? Because I had an experience one day where I had a problem with my car and these two men stopped to try and help me. And then I had another problem with my car and there they were again. And it was just such an interesting the way the whole thing happened that so what I got was they were my guardian angels. And
Yes.
so I was just wondering how that worked.
And the way I would answer that is they can materialize in situations very much like that, with being in danger on the road. That's many of them have done that. And that most of them have a story to tell of helping to change a tire or something like that.
Mhm.
But they don't need to stay that way. They can do that long enough and then be on their way.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to get some clarity on that.
As far as I know, mine has never materialized in that way, but then I'm around all these people that nearly died all kind of different ways, and I've made it all the way to 68 without an NDE.
Yeah. So does anyone have a last question? This has just been wonderful. I really appreciate your conversation and all your great stories and your just your beingness, your aura, your you're just so beautiful.
Well, thanks.
Georgina, I see you have a last question.
Yes, it's a thanks. There was something you said at the beginning, Father, about there are beings, but not everyone behaves well. Can you repeat that, please?
I believe that God made everyone well, and that we're all come from God and are made of the divine stuff. We're all chips off the old block. We're all made of the stuff of God. But that doesn't mean that everyone is aware of who and what they are and how marvelous they are. And a lot of people are currently ill-behaved.
And I appreciate that so much. There is a couple I'm going to send this recording to based on that. And then there is another couple that I'm going to send this to because their child is very much afraid of their passing. And I feel like there's been so many hopeful things said tonight that if the two of them listen to this and then perhaps pull pieces, it will assure their child. So thank you so much, Dottie. Thank you very, very much for inviting, Father.
Well, Chantel, my assistant here, did a push to invite you to be on the newsletter list, not just because we want more numbers. Everybody always wants that, but we really do have a lot of fun things coming up, and several of them are on Zoom that you could take part in if you felt like it. So if you, we'll soon be doing a little book study on a book called Good Goats that I think you might very much enjoy. So anyway, would love to have you along for the ride.
And Victoria, you have your hand up.
Oh yeah, it just sounds like you were sort of prepared for your whole life to be doing this. And I wonder how it's changed you, or what you would say that I mean, you've talked about that, but any further words about how this has impacted you?
Well, we're in the Catholic world, we're in the Easter season. We're between Easter and Pentecost. And the readings in our masses during this time of the year show all these fishermen who now are going out to all the world and telling the good news, all these little men and women who are way out of their comfort zone, just trying to say that death doesn't define us, that Jesus is risen from the dead, that they're moving in the Holy Spirit and so on. I just feel like I've been brought into such fine company, and I just try to be faithful to the calling that I've been given, and then not to care if people object, or think you're crazy or whatever. Do you know that phrase about what you think about me is none of my business? I used to be very thin-skinned, and I'm not that anymore. I just am happy to be able to do the work that I do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much. It's 9 o'clock, and so I think we're at the end of our meeting. I'd like to thank, I'm going to put this back on just a minute, on the gallery view, so we can see everybody, so I can see everybody. And I'd just like to say thank you again for Father Nathan for coming and sharing your stories, and yourself, and Chantel for helping us put this together, and for all of you for coming and participating. And if you would like to be, if you're not on my mailing list and would like to be on it for future IONS programs, just put your email in the chat, and I'll send you the link to the recording, and also put you on the mailing list for future programs. So thank you, everybody, and thank you so much again, Father Nation and Nathan. And
Okay, great to be with you. Have a great
wonderful
night.
spring. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, Dottie.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.